see, make sure nobody else is coming in. Welcome everyone to 52 Living Ideas. Tonight is Dao De Jing, and we'll be covering verses 41 and 42. So please line up by typing exclamation point in the chat to read the verse that spoke most to you. And then we'll come to Jason with his translation. Evanique.
So this is the God as Nature Sees God translation, a Christian reading. So number 42, no, wait, 41, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, 41. When wise people hear about the Tao, they follow it carefully. When ordinary people hear about the Tao, they can take it or leave it. When foolish people hear about the Tao, they laugh out loud. If they didn't laugh out loud, it wouldn't be the Tao. Therefore, it is said, the path into light seems dark. The way ahead seems to go backwards. The path into peace seems rough. The greatest good seems to us empty. True purity seems stained. The best efforts seem inadequate. Appropriate caution seems like cowardice. True essence seems violated. The truly square bears no concerns. Sound vessels take time to build. Celestial music is seldom paid much heed. The greatest image is impossible to capture. The Tao is hidden and nameless, yet it is the Tao alone that nourishes and completes all things.
Thank you, Evanique. Next up is Mike.
My translation is from Wayne Dyer's book. A great scholar hears of the Tao and begins diligent practice. A middling scholar hears of the Tao and retains some and loses some. An inferior scholar hears of the Tao and roars with ridicule. Without that laugh, it would not be the Tao. So there are constructive sayings on this. The way of illumination seems dark. Going forward seems like a retreat. The easy way seems hard. The true power seems weak. True purity seems tarnished. True clarity seems obscure. The greatest art seems unsophisticated. The greatest love seems indifferent. The greatest wisdom seems childish. The Tao is hidden and nameless. The Tao alone nourishes and brings everything to fulfillment.
Thank you, Mike. Next up, I have Katie.
I'm reading from the Stephen Mitchell version. When a superior man hears of the Tao, he immediately begins to embody it. When an average man hears of the Tao, he half believes it, half doubts it. When a foolish man hears of the Tao, he laughs out loud. If he didn't laugh, it wouldn't be the Tao. Thus it is said, the path into the light seems dark. The path forward seems to go back. The direct path seems long. True power seems weak. True purity seems tarnished. True steadfastness seems changeable. True clarity seems obscure. The greatest R seems unsophisticated. The greatest love seems indifferent. The greatest wisdom seems childish. The Tao is nowhere to be found, yet it nourishes and completes all things.
Thank you, Katie. Next, we have David, and then followed by Maritza.
Yes, thanks, Joe.
You
So
missed Brian, Joe.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go with Brian after David.
it's okay. Okay. So Herman Old version. When a man of highest wisdom is told about the Tao, he is eager to follow it. When a man of middling wisdom is told about the Tao, at times he follows it, at times he loses touch with it. When a man of no wisdom is told about the Tao, he laughs aloud. If he did not laugh at it, it could not rightly be named the Tao. For the maker of Proverbs has truly said, enlightenment in the Tao seems like darkness. Progress in the Tao seems like regress. Evenness in the Tao seems like roughness. The highest virtue seems like the emptiness of a valley. The purest white seems murky. The most exalted virtue seems inadequate. The strongest virtue seems unstable. The most steadfast nature seems variable. For the greatest square of all has no angles. The largest vessels are late brought to perfection. The highest note is scarcely heard. The greatest image has no shape. The Tao in its secrecy is nameless. Yet it is the Tao which is behind everything and brings all things to completion.
Thank you, David. Brian.
Okay, I'm going with the version by Yasuhiko Denku Kimura. When a superior person hears the Tao, he practices it committedly. When a mediocre person hears the Tao, he practices it sometimes, but just as often ignores it. When an inferior person hears the Tao, he roars with disparaging laughter. If he did not laugh, it would not be the Tao. Thus, the age-old epigrams state, the enlightening way appears dark. The advancing way appears retreating. The level way appears bumpy. The highest virtue appears ordinary. The purest goodness appears sullied. The abundant virtue appears deficient. The perfect virtue appears defective. The most genuine appears insincere. The greatest space has no corners. The greatest talent ripens late. The greatest voice is silent. The greatest image is formless. The Tao is hidden and has no name, yet the Tao alone bestows the power and fulfills the destiny of everything.
Thank you, Brian. Maritza. Followed by Laura.
I'm going to share with you a translation in Spanish. It's by Antonio Rivas. I will read it and translate it for you. Because this one is kind of long, I'm going to read one stanza and translate, and then read the next stanza. It's like 5 stanzas. So Antonio Rivas is similar to Ursula Le Guin in that he does label each of his poems, and he calls this one Taoism. Cuando el fuerte aprende el Tao, lo practica con diligencia. Cuando el avanzado aprende el Tao, lo practica con ocasiones. Cuando el débil aprende el Tao, se alegra y ríe. Aquellos que no ríen no han aprendido nada. When the strong learn the Tao, they practice it with diligence. When the advanced learn the Tao, they practice it on occasion. When the weak learn the Tao, they get happy and laugh. They who do not laugh have learned nothing. Así está dicho, quien comprende el Tao parece incoherente. Quien progresa en el Tao parece fallar. Quien sigue el Tao parece vagabundear. And so it has been said, he who understands Tao seems incoherent. He who progresses in the Tao seems to fail. He who follows the Tao seems to be a vagabond. Así la mayor fuerza aparenta vulnerabilidad. La verdad más brillante aparenta matices. El carácter más pleno aparenta ser incompleto. El corazón más fuerte aparenta debilidad. La naturaleza más hermosa aparenta inconstancia. And so, the biggest strength or force appears as vulnerability. Truth, most brilliant, appears muddled. Character, most bountiful, appears incomplete. The heart, most strong, appears débil, weak. Nature, most beautiful, appears inconstant. Así el cuadrado perfeccionado no tiene esquinas. El arte perfeccionado no tiene sentido. El sexo perfeccionado no tiene clima. La forma perfeccionada carece de forma. As such, the square, perfected, has no corners. The art, perfected, has no meaning. The sex, perfected, has no climax. The form, perfected, is lacking in form. Así el Tao no puede sentirse ni conocerse. Transmite sensación y transciende el conocimiento. As such, the Tao cannot be felt nor known. It transmits sensation and transcends the knowing or recognition. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we have up is Laura, then Margarita.
Okay,
go.
this is the Lao Tzu translation, and better put my glasses on. The superior student listens to the way and follows it closely. The average student listens to the way and follows it some and some not. The lesser student listens to the way and laughs out loud. If there were no laughter, it would not be the way. So it has been said, the light of the way seems dim, the progress of the way seems retreating, and the straightness of the way seems curved. The highest virtue seems as low as the valley. The purest white of the white seems stained. The greatest virtue seems deficient. The sturdiest virtue seems frail. The most fundamental seems fickle. The perfect square lacks corners. The greatest vessel takes long to complete. The highest tone is hard to hear. The great image lacks shape. The way is hidden and nameless. Still only the way nourishes and completes.
Thank you, Laura. Margarita.
Hi, everybody. I will read Bahasa Indonesia. Orang yang kebajikannya tinggi, bila mendengar Dao, akan menaruh hikmat dan melaksanakannya sepenuh hati. Orang yang kebajikannya di tengah-tengah, bila mendengar Dao, terkadang ingat, terkadang lupa. Orang yang kebajikannya rendah, bila mendengar Dao, akan tertawa terbahak-bahak. Bila tidak ditertawakan, belum cukup disebut Dao. Sebab itu ada peribahasa. Orang bijak akan memahami Dao tampak seperti orang bodoh karena ia tak membanggakan kepandaiannya. Ia menjadi pendiam dan dianggap orang bodoh. Orang yang beroleh kemajuan Dao kelihatannya terbelakang. Maka siapa yang menyesuaikan diri dengan Dao, ia menjadi sederhana, tak tamak harta, tak mengejar kemewahan hingga oleh umum dipandang terbelakang. Orang yang hidup tentram di dalam Dao kelihatan kosong, tidak gemerlap, bahkan kelihatan suram. Kebajikan luhur bagaikan lembah yang luas tak terbatas. Kebajikan yang luhur tak tampak wujudnya oleh penglihatan umum. Yang bersih dan murni tampak kotor dan hina, karena orang-orang suci senantiasa menunjukkan sikap merendah dan jujur. Kebajikan yang tidak berbatas bagi pandangan umum tidak tampak sempurna, karena luasnya kebajikan tak tampak oleh pandangan umum. Ruangan yang sangat luas tak ada sudut dan batasnya. Benda yang paling besar lama selesainya. Bagai ruang angkasa tak ada batasnya dan akan selesai pada waktu yang terakhir. Suara yang terlalu tinggi tidak terdengar. Wujud yang paling besar di alam semesta tidak berupa. Dao Maha Sempurna senantiasa tersembunyi dari mata orang sehingga tak ada namanya. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Margarita. And if there's no one else that would like to read their particular translation, I know a few of you have come in late, we'll go to Jason. Type exclamation point in the chat if you would like to read your version. But
Okay.
go ahead, Jason.
It's my turn.
Go ahead.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Okay, on the very first part, I think almost everybody doing the same way. So I just read it. That means 3 levels of scholar who their response here about the Tao. So when the wise scholar hear about when the wise scholars hear about Tao, they practice it diligently. When the average scholars hear about Tao, they ignore it unintentionally. When the base scholars hear about Tao, they laugh at it loudly. If they do not laugh, it will not be the Tao. So because it's hidden and nameless, so the only the wise scholar or the highest level will know and practice, and the base low level scholar will just see it's funny and laugh at. So that's the thing. And then then come with a lot of things. Okay, so this one, if you, at least the Chinese here, and you probably can see the third words, they all the same, right? And this word means look like, appears, okay, look like us, seems like this word. So you know it must be like very well structured. And then you look at on the second word, you will see Dao, Dao, Dao. That's 3. That means 3 different kind of Dao will look like this. Then you will see these 3 words. That's the virtual. 3 kind of virtual will look like this. Then they have something else. So that's the structure, the language structure. Lao Tzu or Dao De Jing is using. If you look at the next one, you will see they all starting with the same. That's Da. That means the great. So there's a great something, look like something. So by knowing this, and I will put in the table. So you will make my translation easier, and then the logic makes sense. So basics, the language structure is A as an attribute, right? You could be clear, advancing, high, low, robust, whatever, something, okay? So like Dao or De or virtue or whatever, okay? A kind of something will appear B, okay? A, B are attribute, right? Adjective, okay? So A, the A will look like B, and which you can expect it kind of the opposite meaning. So the first thing I would say clear. The clear will look dim, and the advancing one look retreating. Okay. The smooth one or easy one will look rock, look difficult. And the high one will look low. My translation kind of, I try to do it word by word. So this word is valley, but you know the valley or basin, that means low. Then this one is a compassing will be insufficient. Robust will be indolent. Solid truth will be inconsistent. Whiteness will look like spotted. So you see kind of like opposite, right? Then we go to 4 great things. So that means the grade A will appear like no B. So there's like something you suppose something like the A, that's kind of, if everything you go to the extreme, the opposite will happen. So basically talk about the square. When the great, very big square, you will not see the corner. The great vessel, okay, you will complete very late. You cannot expect to complete early. The melody, the great melody will become inaudible, okay? It's no sound, okay? the great image will become formless. So basics is talking about when you just like you climb the mountain to the peak, you will start to going down. So I think that's the logic, okay, and in this chapter trying to put it. So by knowing this and then make the translation, then the translation will become easier. So the first part will look like this. The clear Tao appears dim. The advancing Tao appears retreating. The smooth Tao appears rock. The high virtue appears low. The encompassing virtue appears insufficient. The robust virtue appears indolent. The solid truth appears inconsistent. Right now, we come with 4 great things. When you go to the extreme, opposite thing will happen. Okay, so the great square appears to have no corners. The great vessel appears to have late completion. The great melody appears to have inaudible sounds. The great image appears to have no form. Then that's draw the conclusion. So basically, that's the essence of this chapter. I want to tell you, the Tao is hidden and nameless, but only the Tao is good at providing and completing. So let's draw the conclusion and a little bit detail on this one. Okay, this word. Okay, I like to ask Marisa. I think your version you talk about great art. Is that right?
Yes.
What's the next one?
And we said that the square has no corners.
Yeah. What's
Art
next?
has no like meaning, no feeling.
Okay.
And sex has no climax. And
sex. Hold on. You talk about sex?
Yes.
Okay. Why it come to sex?
I don't know. I didn't make the translation.
So the Spanish you talk about sex.
Yes.
Okay. That's
they
very
talk about form.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Okay, and I can deal with the art, the vessel.
So it's funny because it's just like yours. The only difference is instead of melody, we have sex. I mean, maybe for us, sex is melody. I don't know.
Yeah, that's another way to think about it. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So, but this one, I think Aman probably have more thing to talk about. But this one. I think in today's so-called 大器晚成, okay, the original is from this text. And today's Chinese language, people use these words very often, okay? And the correct translation, if you go to today, if you find any Chinese or people speak Chinese, you ask him what's the meaning of 大器晚成. They probably don't know it's from Lao Tzu, but they will tell you that means the great talent, okay, mature late, okay. That's the today's meaning. But I don't see in 2,500 years ago, the original text has this meaning. I think the original text means the great vessel, great equipment, great stuff cannot complete in the early time. You have to wait. I think that's the meaning. So that's why I don't use, I think some translation, I think Brian's translation put the greatest talent, the mature late. And in today's sense, that's correct if you pick up only this one. But if you put inside the text, I would believe the great vessel is the right thing, because you see the 4 things, corner, vessel, melody, image, they all something, okay? They are talking about something, not talking about some virtue. So in this case, I will insist the great should be not great talent. It should be the great vessel. So that's it. Yeah, I think this one, I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. So folks, Aman, would you like to comment? And then folks.
Actually, I wanted to say thank you, because that clarified when we did this translation back and forth. It was something where great talent appears to be completed late, is how I've read that translation many, many times. And the logic stood out there. understanding how a great vessel could appear late, to have late completion, seemed to be incongruent with a lot of the rest of it. But when Jason's talking about this as the completion of a great project, and you think about like some giant bell or some other grand vessel that is something that needs to be, you know, done, having late completion, it makes more sense after hearing that. So I wanted to say thank you mostly.
Well, thank you. And it's a great insight. And Jason, and folks, line up to talk about what you took away from this particular verse.
Yeah, one thing I forget about this words, the great talent mature late, is become a very common saying in the Chinese dialogue. So usually the application is when your kids or the kids is not doing well in school, and you may say the great vessel complete late, or the great talent mature late, because, you know, just like Albert Einstein, he cannot speak until 3 years old. So that's one of the common saying in the daily conversation. It's original from this text. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. And we have David followed by Evanique. Folks, just type exclamation point for what you had taken away from this particular verse.
Yeah, thanks very much, Joe. Yeah, I wanted to ask what I've put in the chat, which is, again, with this vessel, I mean, in some of the other previous verses, there was this, I think there was Lord, there was these words that Jason said, you know, really would be more appropriate at that time as a sort of a military person. So I was wondering with this vessel, I mean, or is it possible? I mean, given that we've said so much that this is a instruction to a prince, I mean, instruction to military leaders, is there anything here that this vessel could be a military vessel, a military equipment, a military campaign that's late? Just wondering if there's any military context or possibility for those words.
Okay, let me answer this one. My answer is no. Okay, and I did a check on the text. Okay, and this word, so-called qi, vessel, has been used, I think, about probably 10 times in the 10 different chapters. And I double check what's the meaning, and they all mean the same thing. Means vessel, equipment, some utility, some things you can use. Okay, so I don't see that's related to military. And if you look at the entire chapter on this one, I cannot smell any military or political here. This one is pure talking about the essence of Dao, at least for this chapter. So I will reject any meaning about the vessel as a military.
Well, not trying to belabor. I'm not. I mean, thanks very much for this answer. I mean, but I mean, I'm messing. When you said vessel, the immediate thing that came across to me was like a ship.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, probably that's the English version. English.
Because I mean, there's vessel in like a container, and there's vessel in terms of equipment. Right. The vessel is a ship. So I was wondering if this, like building a ship, took a long time or anything. But that wouldn't have any. That is similar meaning in Chinese.
Yeah, probably I have to rethink about the words I use, because to me, vessel, until you told me, I didn't connect with the big warship, this kind of thing, but it's possible. But what I mean vessel could be the container, a tool, like a ball, okay, and a box, this kind of thing, you know. So I don't see that's there. So, and the plus at that time, probably there's no technique to build big warship.
Okay, interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have Evanique next, and anyone else that wishes to comment on this. Oh, actually, let's let Aman go first, and then we'll come to Evanique. And then folks, please type the exclamation point in the chat for your takeaways.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt.
No, please don't.
But in this conversation, something just finally clicked, and it's in this back and forth. And when I was struggling with this, the preceding line to it, the great square has no corners. there is a understanding that you always have to sort of look for the subtext. What is the great square? The great square is an image of earth. Earth is conceived of as square, whereas heaven is conceived of as a circle. That's why you see those ancient Chinese coins that are circular with a square hole in it. It's a representation of heaven and earth, of yin and yang. So that line that precedes it, the great square has no corners, is an image, it's evoking the image of earth as the greatest square. Therefore, you can never find the corners of the earth. Bearing that in mind, and then thinking of the vessel as a rounded shape, a pot, a bowl, a cup, a vase, you have a round shape. And when it says it has late completion or is never completed, then there is this idea of the greatest. So the greatest square is the earth, and it is so great that its corners are beyond the reach of mankind. The greatest vessel is the heavens, and everything that fits in it is so vast that it never seems to have completed its shape as a vessel. I do think that that is some of the subtext buried in those first two lines, is this image of earth and heaven, of yin and yang in their most great aspects. And this just clicked while I was listening to the discussion on this. So that's the 2 cents I wanted to add.
Thank you, Aman. Avanique?
Yeah, thank you, Aman, because that just, when I saw the greatest square lacks corners, I was thinking a big circle. And then when you say earth, and I'm like, oh, it perfectly makes sense now. So thank you for, clarifying that. So what I got from it is, this feels like what the main message that I get is that, like, when you're trying to take the easy path, it's not actually the easiest path in life. Like when you're trying to, like, I'll use an example, like when you're trying to get out of something, and instead of saying, I don't want to do it, you kind of try to find like every excuse in the book to try to get out of this thing instead of just being straight and saying, I don't want to do it, because you don't want to upset anybody. And so I use that as an example because I think in all throughout this chapter, it talks about, especially in the second part where it says, hence a set of sayings arose, the brightest path looks dim, the path forward seems backward, the smooth path feels jagged. Because it's hard to tell people the truth, and it's hard to tell yourself the truth. But I think once you do that, you feel a sense of freedom because you don't have to hide anymore. So when you're trying to like hide what you're truly feeling, you're hide what you want to say, you feel like, it just feels like more of a weight on you, rather than if you just say the truth, it just feels freer. And it seems like that would be the hardest path, but it's actually the easiest path once you do it. So that's what I got from it.
Thank you. And Katie has a question in the chat. I don't get the comment about laughing and the Tao.
I really want to understand that. If there were no laughter, the Tao would not be what it is. I don't understand that.
Aman?
Yeah, your timing was impeccable because Katie, I was just working on chatting back to you. I was saying in that there are 2 ways that can be interpreted. And I think it's meant in both contexts. One is that the quote unquote truth of the Tao is so simplistic that the inferior scholar who still believes that there is so much more complexity, nuance, and detail to learn in the universe, here's this simple admonishment of this is what the Tao is, this is its truth. We'll laugh at it in its absurdity. And you know that it is true because the overeducated mind is unable to accept it as true. The other way this can be interpreted, and I think this was intimated in one or two of the translations, is that the inferior is always what is sought. If you read through a lot of the chapters on De, you're always looking for the lower position. So although it talks about the superior scholar, the mediocre scholar, and the inferior scholar, the trick here is that you actually want to emulate the inferior scholar, and that the joy of epiphany that comes with that inferior scholar's understanding is so absolute that it will make them defy sort of etiquette and protocol and guffaw aloud in front of their teachers, their superiors, and others. And that is how you know they've got the Tao. There's actually a certain degree of admiration within Taoism for the lowly, the foolish, the nearly absurd, because they are probably closer to having obtained the Tao than someone who spent far too much time with their sleeves rolled up, their fingers stained in ink, and poring over books to understand this hidden truth that is truly simple enough to understand when you let go of intellectualizing it. I hope that kind of answers that for you.
That's a wonderful answer. Thank you for chiming in on that. Maritza.
I want to add a little something to what Amon was just saying, because I don't necessarily disagree with what he's saying, but I think it's, so the translation, some of the translations I looked at spoke about, the low a little differently. So, in the translation I read for you guys in Spanish, it's saying when the weak learn of the Tao, they get happy and they laugh. And it's a little bit different from Katie's version. But in my mind, what it's signifying is the aspect of when one is more of an open slate without the vast sums of knowledge on a topic, there's almost a joyous relief in getting something. Like, think about, for those of you who have math to learn, think about when you were learning a very tough mathematical concept. When you finally get it, there's like this release that you're like, yes. So that's what I thought of when I read that they get happy and they laugh. It's just that very simple, to me, almost natural human tendency to seek relief when, one feels a sense of accomplishment, or like it's personal, but when you think you've understood something, you get that like almost like aha moment. That's what I saw that as being when I read that piece. So I just wanted to add that to what Amon was saying. For the rest of this poem, as I see it, and first read, it seems to be a mess of contradictions, but at a deeper glance, I feel like it's just saying to us that it's not necessary to have, and maybe the word perfection comes to mind because the translation that I gravitated towards does use perfection, whereas in the English ones, what's used is like has no, or I'm actually not sure why the translation I have uses the word perfected, but for the four things where it's talking about the corners, melodies, image, vessel in the English translation. In the Spanish one, they preface it. They'll say, art perfected. So what that makes me think is that it's actually a cautionary tale saying to me that the Tao is not about the perfect. That it's, you know, in our learning and trying to walk the path of the Tao, attempting to attain perfection in anything, whether it's a vessel, art, a melody, an image, we're losing sight of the way. So I don't know, that's just kind of how I viewed this poem. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Before I go to David, Jason, do you want to respond to anything that's been said?
Yeah, I really appreciate Maria's and the explanation. I think, is that from Spanish translation or does your understand?
It's my understanding based
It's
from
a
the
aha
Spanish
moment.
translation.
Yeah, it's an aha moment. That's based on the Spanish translation. Yeah, I think that's very interesting. But I just have to say, I don't see that's possible the right way, because the word they use is laugh loudly. Okay, use big laugh. So this kind, if we only use laugh, it could explain as aha moment. But if he said laugh loudly, okay, probably not. So that's I have to base on the original Chinese. Okay.
Oh, that's interesting, because I also didn't read in a few of the English translations I read, I didn't see laugh louder.
Yes, they use big
Oh,
laugh.
okay.
Okay, the original text is big laugh. Okay, not just laugh. If it's laugh, you can explain as aha. Okay, or like this. But big laugh, I think it's very difficult to understand as aha moment. So that's I think. And the second thing I'd like to share is my personal feeling about read this sentence. I don't see this is a good writing on this sentence, because for some reason I just don't feel, you know, that this sentence, the lower or the inferior scholar heard about Tao will laugh loudly. If it's not laughing at Tao, that's not the real Tao. I just don't see this kind of language fit in this book. But unfortunately, in different versions, look like this text is there. So just my personal feeling. I just don't see that's a good description, and I don't see that fit well in the whole text. Yeah.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for waiting. David next, then followed by Kevin.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, two things that I wanted to point out that noticed. I mean, one is this conversation again about the laughter in these learned person, because I mean, I was looking through a number of these translations, and it was very interesting to me that Jason's translation said, like, the base scholar. I mean, I understand this is supposed to be a gradation of highest lows. I'm still sort of curious what really the text is saying, because the translation I'm seeing, they say like the worthless scholar, the worst student, the lowest of this, and or where is it? What's it? The foolish student. I mean, it's always sort of this derogatory term in these translations. But I mean, when Jason said base, he came across to me as just more not that this person is stupid. It's just like a person who's more experienced or less experienced. A person. And this was more that, as Jason and Amon were saying, that this was sort of the simple person who isn't, overly analyzing it, sees it more purely, more easily. And that's what I sort of got the impression, especially with this base, that the text was trying to say that this conversation saying about lowest or foolish is actually sort of, with this pejorative, is applying something that sort of wasn't meant in the text. I think that it's I mean, it reminds me of some sort of parables in Judaism as well, that like the simplest child or the simplest person is able to just recognize the truth of something more easily. That, in other words, all of them are seeing it, and they're just seeing it in more easily, more difficultly. But it's not a matter of it's not a matter of big laughter out of foolishness or stupid. It's a big laughter of sort of, as I said, like this aha moment, or this big laughter, because, and especially the next sentence, that the statement that, you know, if it did not laugh, it wouldn't be the Tao. I mean, that's sort of the laugh, you know, is the Tao. I mean, that it's the joy of this knowledge. It's the simplicity of it, not even an aha moment, but just that clarity is the laughter. I mean, that's sort of what, you know, I got out of it. And the other comment that I had was at this end, I mean, given this really amazing insight that Amon gave about the square and the vessel, I really, I mean, I think there's something more deeper to those other two sentences. I mean, I'm not enough of a Chinese scholar, or enough of the imagery, you know, or the experience of Chinese, but I think there's some other illusion going on there, because I noticed the sentences like the great space, the great vessel. So you've got two tangible things. And then you're talking about the great music and the great form, the great art, whatever. You got these two sort of intangible things. So it's, you know, and if we're saying that we have this, that the utmost of the square is the earth, and the utmost of this vessel is the universe we're traveling through. I'm not saying that Jason or Ramon have to know this. I mean, but it sort of is calling out to me that there must be some allusion there to the the greatest music and the greatest art has some other meaning, evokes something else that is, or at least was known at that time, you know, a couple thousand years ago. There's something about that I would because I agree so much now with what, you know, Amon said about the square and this vessel, that and I can't imagine that those other two sentences wouldn't have another strong allusion, or have some other deeper meaning of something more than just, I mean, that they're true in the superficial sense, just as the square of it, you know, but that there is something deeper under them that we're not seeing. And again, it's not a matter of, if you know, again, like rolling up the sleeves of the, you know, that you need to look and make this too complicated, but it seems like there must be something more there.
Yeah, Jason or Amon, do you wish to comment about that? Because the square was quite of an insight for me as well, thinking about it like the earth.
Yeah, let me answer David two questions. Okay, first is about the inferior base something. Okay, I think I probably over translate. Okay, the original text is 上中下. That means up, middle, and down. That's the three words, very common words. Up, middle, down. Okay, so that's up to you to interpret what's the meaning of down. But I think these three words constantly show up in not only in Dao De Jing, also in the text during that time, to categorize people, categorize any kind of virtue as the superior, average, and inferior. I think that's a very common word. Okay, so that's a very, very basic Chinese word, nothing special. And David also point out very good point. And happened, I thought about your question when I do the translation. The four things: the square, the vessel, the melody, the image. Right? You describe all these one are two are tangible, two are intangible. I also thought about this question. The answer is these four are all sensible, okay, not necessarily tangible. They are sensible. So you think about the first one, the square, that's a space. They talk about the space, and they talk about the vessel, talk about the touch, your touch, okay, and they talk about the melody, that's ear, audible, and your image, your sight. So I think they talk about the sensible thing, which if you be so big, right? So huge melody, huge image, basically you don't see it. you don't hear it. Okay, so we talk about our sensor. If we go to extreme, the opposite thing will happen. So I think that's the whole essence on this chapter. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And so next up, I have Kevin, followed by Katie.
Well, thank you, Jules. I just try, my understanding about the translation about the Chinese called 上士, like upper, 士 used to be have meanings like officer. It basically is from military officer. That's one understanding. However, here, yeah, could be like a scholar perspective, how much understand about the Tao. That's and Marisa is translated about the third one, like lower level scholar is like that's good interpretation. It's quite positive about the 下士. However, I would say it's basically sometimes we say it's especially some of the philosophy, right? Say it's so simple, it's stupid, they're going to laugh at it because we scratch the surface. Lots of philosophy think is so simple question. Year by year, generation by generation, actually talk about the deep. It's profound. Anyway, that's one. One link I send. That's about the big vessel. Is how long you take to build that. That's the for music instrument in Chinese called 别宗. Basically, you can. It's like here you can make a piano use a manual way. It's like it's profound. So that's a big vessel. It's hard. Take time to build it. Yeah, I'm paused now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. And with that, we will come to Katie.
Yeah, I'm going to echo Maritza's comment with what you called the mess of contradictions. To me, she said the Tao is not perfect. For me, it also I just read it as it's not always going to be easy. And then sort of like our discussion on God, that the Tao is hidden and the Tao is nowhere to be found. We only can experience the manifestation of it. So sometimes it can be hard to believe in the Tao or that it's there.
Thank you. Margarita, did you have a comment?
Yeah, it's actually almost like what we've been discussing so far. I wonder because, so how is this relationship between teacher and student according to this chapter? Because obviously there are different kind of students, and actually after learning so far, that the truth is so simple. Then how should teacher teach the lesson, and how do they interact when the teacher won't listen or half listen or they fully listen? Yeah, that's my question.
Does Jason or Rahman want to take that? Or
Among you have a better answer. I just don't see here this chapter they have anything good on education, but basically it just tell you when you teach something and then somebody just laughing. I mean, not aha laughing. That means funny laughing.
No, I do kind of understand it, and as I think about it from a classroom perspective, it's kind of funny because some of the loudest guffaws from students are when they actually are really getting what you're saying or what the lesson is. As far as how you go about teaching, there's a whole chapter that talks about, in learning the Tao, every day one learns less and less, something more is removed and removed. And it seems like there's almost this idea of the bottom scholar is the one who's going to guffaw. That's the one who's going to get it. or at least that's one way to interpret it. As far as what you could do to impart this, I don't know that you could do it all in one go. I think there might almost be at first blush, you'll see this, it'll seem so clear, it'll make you laugh aloud. You'll then study it to the middle degree, and then you kind of get it, kind of don't, kind of get it, kind of don't. And at the highest degree, you get it, but you stop laughing about it. That's one possible way of taking sort of this hierarchy and interpreting it. But to answer your question about what is the effective way to impart the Tao to a student, I think the whole text is a testament at you can try and do it, but you know how effective you're going to be is going to totally depend on the receptiveness of the audience. You can't make them be in a receptive place for it. They simply must be there when they're ready to be there.
Yeah, because in some translation I see it's not just translated as scholar, but sergeant, colonel, you know, and lay people. So it seems like there's this hierarchy. And what should, I mean, yeah, there could be this hierarchy in learning Tao, and how should people with higher Tao treat the people with the lower Tao? Do they still need to transfer the knowledge, or just let it be? You become the protector of not the foolish, we can say. How this interact?
I mean, the legend of Lao Tzu is that he had to be thrown in jail and held at gunpoint to write the Dao De Jing in the first place. So reluctantly, I guess, is how you share your knowledge when you actually have it. But he did it. And that also is very telling. I don't know what the absolute responsibility is, but I think sensitivity to the audience that you're imparting is instrumental in having any chance of effectiveness.
So I have Marco, then Andrew, but Jason, do you want to comment first?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So the second word. Okay.
All right. Listen. I'm sorry. I'm checking out.
Oh, so okay. The second. We talk about the. I think to answer Margarita's the two questions. First, talk about the scholar or people or something. So the words in the text is sun, up, okay, up, shi, okay, scholar, okay, and the middle and the down, right? And the second word is shi. I think Kevin explained it. It's like kind of scholar, kind of, but origin, that meaning is kind of position, government office, the low-ranking government position, okay, called shi, okay, and then usually, at that time, the government position are held by aristocrats. So basics, you can consider as scholar, officer, okay, this kind of meaning. That's it. But the later sense, okay, all the people who study, okay, who literate people, we will consider as shi, okay, or gentleman. That's the later time. So I think the scholar probably, or student, probably also consider a good translation at this moment, at this chapter. So it's related to Margarita's second question about teaching. So I think since Margarita is very interested in the teaching. So if you want to spoil the story, if you read the chapter 43, they talk about teaching. Okay, I think next week we'll talk. Lao Tzu tell you about the teaching, okay, without words, teaching without the words.
So Marco, then Andrew, do you guys have any comments you'd like to share?
This was just a general comment on the text, like how I interpreted the text, and basically, it's like taking the part where it says, the greatest love seems indifferent. Like that made me think of like a married couple who's like arguing, and like you assume like, oh, you know, they have a bad relationship or something, and but like it's sort of the argument is what it takes to have like a good relationship. So it's like, and there is love there, but it's not, you know, you're not seeing it at the surface. So it's like, it's sort of like, like you're not seeing, it's just seeing things are that on the surface, that there's more to it than just like a surface thing. That's it.
Thank you, Marco. And then Andrew.
Yeah, hi. Just one thing. I hear a lot that what I'm hearing anyway is this sense that the messages in the Tao are, you know, are very simple in their essence, and that it's for that reason that you know, somebody who's not intellectual or I'm getting confusing. I'm hearing confusing or contradictory interpretations by different people, which, you know, that's absolutely reasonable. But obviously, I'm having a hard time articulating this. Basically, the way I see this is that it's not that what the messages or let's say the underlying concept in the Tao, it's simple in essence, but that doesn't mean it's simply it's not simple to understand, right? It does take a lot of contemplation to get over the hurdle to really kind of see through what is in front of you, you know, in the regular world, and all of those, and basically see through it. You know, that takes a lot of deep consideration. So it's, when they talk about the simple student kind of laughing, to me, it's not because they're laughing because, oh, this is so obvious. It's really it's not that at all. It's that simple, that, let's say, lower student, whatever kind of terrible terminology, you know, that's been used there. It's that they're so caught up in the day-to-day and seeing the world as it's expressed, you know, in its physical form and how things are expressed socially and everything that they've learned, that this simple message, which takes a lot to contemplate, it just seems absurd. You know, I think Aman, I heard him say this, but so I think there's a confusion, maybe I'm hearing that it's the simple person who's more inclined to understand the Tao. Actually, I think that's backwards.
Thank you. And does anybody else have any other comments they would like to make this time? Aman.
Oh,
Yeah, I do want to take one last crack at this. And Andrew, I want to thank you because you bring up a very valid point. The distinction between simple and easy. They are not the same thing. Something can be profoundly simple. Finishing a novel is simple. Keep writing words on paper until you're done. That doesn't make it easy. Easy and simple are not at all the same. And I do think that the quote unquote truth being imparted here is simple, but it is not always easy to understand. One of the little parts of the translation that I edited with Jason was that line, the great melody appears to have inaudible sounds. And in the edit, I suggested that they're just tweaking it just a little so that you bring out this idea that a melody has inaudible sounds, points to this very Taoist value of valuing the ignored, valuing the background, valuing the silence between the notes, the empty space between the paint on the canvas. Those are where all the action is. And there's an earlier chapter of the Dao De Jing where it talks about the empty space in a vessel or the empty space in a room. Those are the things we use. This is a intrinsic Taoistic value, if I can turn it into an adjective. And I think some of that is actually what's being pointed at here. So although it is simple to see those empty spaces and those silences and those otherwise neglected components, it's not always easy to do so because we as a species are drawn to the liminal, to the phenomena that appears to us as opposed to necessarily the hollow substance that substantiates it, if that makes any sense. And I'll stop there because it seemed like a good point.
It's an excellent point. Thank you. And if there are no other comments, let's move to verse 42. So type exclamation point in the chat to read your favorite version. And I want to make sure that we give this verse its just due, primarily because of Amon's comments last week. So folks, go ahead and type exclamation point in the chat if you'd like to read your favorite version. Ebonique, thank you for always going first.
Sure, I
And then
figured just
followed
get
by
it over
David.
with.
Well, it's brave to go first. Thank you.
You're welcome. Verse 42, and this is from the Divine Feminine Dao De Jing. The Tao births one, one births two, two births three, three births 10,000 things. 10,000 things carry yin on their backs and yang in their arms. With qi in the breath, harmony follows. What people loathe, to be alone, outcast and hungry, are the titles the royal take on for themselves. For some gain in suffering, and some suffer in gaining. What others teach, I also teach. The violent and bold do not die a natural death. This teaching is my starting point.
Thank you. So next up, I have Mike.
This is also Wayne Dyer. The Tao gave birth to one, one gave birth to two, two gave birth to three, and three begat the 10,000 things. The 10,000 things carry yin and embrace yang. They achieve harmony by combining these forces. People suffer at the thought of being without parents, without food, or without worth. Yet this is the very way that kings and lords once described themselves. For one gains by losing and loses by gaining. What others taught, I teach. The violent do not die a natural death. That is my fundamental teaching.
Thank you. David.
Yes, sure, thanks.
Appreciate that.
So the hermeneutical is, the Tao was born the one. From the one was born the two. From the two was born the three. And from the three, all things proceeded. All creatures have the shadow at their backs and embrace the light. And the everlasting breath of life unites them. What men hate is to be orphaned, lonely, unworthy. But do not kings and princes often so describe themselves? For things by being diminished may be increased, and by being increased diminished. What others teach, I will teach too. Those who are foolhardy and violent do not come to a natural end. On this maxim, I too will base my teaching.
Thank you, David. And so next I have up Laura. You're on mute. There
I
you go.
need one more second, okay? Sorry.
Take your time. Take your time.
I was listening to this and looking at another translation. I'm wondering, are we talking about the same thing? Because the two poems were so different. I was going crazy trying to figure out where I was and whether I was right or not, or wrong or whatever. Okay, mine will be from the Lao Tzu. And I just have to, oh, wait a second. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm holding everybody up.
We can let Maritza go next and come back to you.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Maritza.
Funny, I feel a little bit like Laura. I'm like, wait a minute, my translation seems way different. Okay, so this is from Antonio Rivas. I'm going to read for you in Spanish. This one's short, so I'll read the whole thing and then translate it. This one he labeled as the title, Armonía, which means harmony. Dao lleva a la virtud lleva a la contención lleva a la acepción lleva al mundo. Todas las cosas comienzan con virtud y terminan con contención, pero es la acepción que la lleva a la armonía. Como otros enseñaron, yo enseño. Aquello sin armonía termina con violencia. Esta es mi enseñanza. The Tao lleva as takes. This may not translate so well. I'm going to try anyway. The Tao takes the virtue. The virtue takes the contention. The contention takes the ascension. The ascension takes the world. Today, all things begin with virtue and end with contention. But it is the ascension that takes the harmony. As others have shown, I shall show. That which is without harmony ends with violence. This is my, literally it says showing, but it means like this is my learning. It's the way we would use that word. Sorry, thanks.
No, thank you. Thank you for that translation. If there are no other people in the queue, which I do not see, are we going to come back to Laura? Laura, are you ready?
Just wait. Okay. This is Lao Tzu translation. And it goes as follows. The Tao produced one, one produced two, two produced three, three produced all things. All things leave behind them the obscurity out of which they come and go forward to embrace the lightness into which they have emerged while they are harmonized by the breath of vacancy. What men dislike to be orphans, to have little virtue, to be as carriages without naves. And yet these are the destinations which kings and princes use for themselves. So it is that some things are increased by being diminished, and others are diminished by being increased. What other men thus teach, I also teach. The violent and the strong do not die their natural death. I will make this the basis of my teaching. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Margarita.
Yes, this is from Bahasa. I just realized it's something about teaching too. So Tao menciptakan satu, satu menciptakan dua, dua menciptakan segala benda di alam semesta. Segala benda memanggul yin dan memeluk sifat yang, maka menimbulkan keselarasan. Umumnya orang membenci kemiskinan, sepi, dan terbuang. Tapi raja yang dimuliakan membahasakan diri dengan sebutan-sebutan itu. Jika tampak merugikan, sesungguhnya bermanfaat. Jika tampak menang, sesungguhnya kalah. Pengetahuan tersebut adalah pokok kenyataan yang diajarkan para bijak sejak dulu. Orang kuat yang menggunakan kekuatan untuk kejahatan akhirnya akan menemukan ajal. Dengan pengetahuan ini, aku menjadi guru untuk memberi pelajaran kepada sesama. Thank you.
Thank you, Margarita. And if there are no other translations, Jason, why don't you walk us through?
Yeah, okay. I think this one is, I would say it's easier. Oh, I'd like to mention this one is, this one is one only chapter deal with yin and yang. Okay, so even you can claim everything is about yin and yang, but the word yin and yang only appear on this chapter. Okay, and the second thing about qi, only 3 chapters talk about have the qi show up. Okay, chapter 10, 42, and the 55. Okay, this one is qi. Okay, and in the old translation, because qi they all translate as something, but in today's in English, in American English, qi kind of we know what's mean by qi. So okay, let me read my translation. The oneness is born out of the Tao. The two are born out of the one, out of oneness. The three are born out of the two. All things are born out of the three. All things carry yin and embrace yang and use the vital qi to harmonize them. Okay, so here, let me have a little bit explanation. So if you look at the Chinese, basically is pretty simple, right? If you pay attention, you already know the first word is Dao, and this one is give birth to, Dao give birth to one, one give birth to two, two give birth to three, three give birth to 10,000 things. And just like I explained, 10,000 things in Dao De Jing or in the ancient text means every living organism, right? Basically, it means the domestic animal, the crop, okay, the grain, and the people. Okay, so that's why 10,000 things. So question would be, I think Amon probably have a better answer, but my understanding would be Tao is oneness, and then will give birth to two. Two, I think it means yin and yang, and the two will give birth to three. I believe, but not sure, I put it up, probably means very common concept in ancient Chinese, probably before Dao De Jing, the heaven, the sky, the earth, the land, and the people. These 3 things, I think. And these 3 things, they will give birth to everything in the world. Okay, so I think that's Dao De Jing, this chapter try to deal with how does the universe, our world started. And then they start talking about the yin is on your back and the yang is in front, and with qi, the vital qi, will harmonize. They try to explain everything. How does it happen in this world? And the second part, in some scholar may not include this one. They think this one probably belong to other place or not necessary. So sometimes you find out this one, I put the part 2, is not so well connected on the part 1. So so the first part is this one, people avoid words like the separated one, the lonely one, the unsalaried one, but the ruler and the lords use these words to refer to themselves. I think the same sentence appear in, I think in 2 chapters ago. I think last week we talked about this one, the same thing. The ancient lord and the ruler, they call themselves the separated one, the lonely one, the unsalaried man. Okay, to be I think in chapter 40. Lao Tzu used this kind of custom to prove everything starts from base, from the humble, because the high position one will call themselves in the very unworthy, undesired world. And here, use the same example, but give a little bit different lesson. The lesson is, therefore, things may appear damaged, but actually be beneficial. They may appear beneficial, but actually be damaging. So that means, from the custom, okay, the high position one will call themselves a very undesired name, like call themselves the separated one, the lonely one, the unsalaried one. Okay, so use the same custom to teach a different lesson. Chapter 40, the lesson is everything starts from the very base from the humble. And here the lesson is things appear damaged may actually beneficial, and the things appear beneficial may actually be damaging. Okay, so that's the lesson. And then he talk about teaching. What others taught, I also just teach. So basically, he's telling me whatever I teach is nothing special, just the regular thing. Those who act violently never die naturally. This is the beginning of my teaching. Basically, talking about avoid the violence, the force. Okay, and just common sense. Okay, if you use force and you will die unnaturally, that means you will, not in the old age. Okay, so I think that's what he means. So my opinion would be these two probably not well connected with this one. Okay, so I know some translation or some Chinese scholar remove this part. They think about this one is not belong here, but but most of text include this one, and you may find out it's not well connected with the first part. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Ahmad, do you want to comment really quickly, and then we'll open it up?
I could talk about this. I could talk about this chapter for hours.
Great. No, I know that you mentioned it last week, so I've been looking forward to it. I wanted to save time.
It is so good at doing what so much of this text does, which is to not explicitly educate, but to impart in image and word just enough to be evocative, to get a person to begin to sort of chew and gnaw on the ideas for themselves. And it's fascinating because it is one of the few times you see the word qi in the Dao De Jing, and the only time you explicitly see yin and yang brought up. There are some very nuanced and creative things here, but as far as the non sequitur of that second part about the unsalaried man, the lowly man, about adopting these positions, after imparting a metaphysical lesson about the nature of things, then you're reminded once again that one of the highest achievements is to adopt these lowly positions, these lowly titles, to take those on for yourself. And then the last admonishment to not act violently lest you die a violent death. That can seem very pedantic, but taken all together, it does a wonderful job of imparting a Taoist worldview and ethic all in one very terse little chapter. I put in the chat, and I will go out on a limb here and be a bad Taoist and actually express my thoughts on this explicitly, that the idea of one giving birth to two, two giving birth to three. The Tao doesn't give birth. The Tao is what gives birth to one. The universe didn't exist until things got into motion. If you think of qi as that sort of idea of motion, then that makes sense. And that character that I put into the chat, which is the character qi, the old image is a pot of rice boiling on a fire, lifting the lid. And it is actually that force that lifts the lid that is considered what qi was. But there's also qi within the grain itself. There's qi in the structure itself. So there is a more yin and more yang form of qi. And that is the two that the one gives birth to. It gives birth to both the yin and yang manifestations of qi. This is the universe as seen by Taoists. That third element of people or persons or mankind, heaven, earth, and man, yin, yang, man. The third element is the thinking entity that can then go on to categorize everything else. That's us and our ability to designate specific identity to discrete manifestations of the world. We create 10,000 things by giving them 10,000 names, not because they absolutely are. A goose doesn't know how much different than a duck it is, but we know the difference between a goose and a duck because we call them goose and duck, whereas they just see bigger and smaller fellow similar weighting bird in similar structure. Dying violently or acting violently, bringing about a violent death, is this idea that if you don't humble yourself enough to not try and over categorize, over discretionize, over systemize everything in your world, you will thrash against the flow of the universe as it really is. And ultimately, it will win. You do not ever stand against the river longer than the river. The river beats you eventually. You can try and impose your will and order onto the universe, but the universe is going to keep winning every time. That is the beginnings of these teachings. And these are just some of the highlights within this chapter. If you really want to dig and dig deep at, like, why is yin on their back but yang embraced in their front when that is antithetical, it becomes really, really detailed. And I think that this is one of those chapters that can be plumbed and mined for years and years and years, and something new always pops out of it. So that's my abridged version.
It's an excellent abridged version, and I actually want to ask a couple of questions based on that, but I want to get to give everybody a chance first. So first I have up David. Would you like to ask your question directly? I mean, it was kind of addressed, I know, but
Yeah, I think it's already addressed.
okay, that's fine. And so then I want to come to, I believe, Elena.
Yes. Okay. So my question is, it's very interesting. In one of the translations, okay, I have echo. Let me see, how can I? Okay. So in one of the translations,
I think you have two, so you have an echo here.
yes.
Yeah, you're here in the meetup twice. Elena, would you like us to come back, or?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
great.
that's without the echo. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I walked out. I'm not there next to the devices. Okay, so one of the translations says that Tao produces unity, and then unity splits into two, and two give birth to three, and three produces everything. And then another one says that Tao has one, and it just so it just immediately the next step is 2 and 3 and then 10,000 things, and then yin and yang in each of the creations. And so what do you think about unity and one? And so what was first, what was second in this particular instance? So that's the question, everyone.
So Jason or Armand, do you want to comment first? I know, Jason, you spoke about this a little bit.
I think Armand was an expert on this.
Oh yeah.
but-
Okay.
but I just
Oh,
want
look,
to
we'll
say
go.
it's just in Chinese word, it's just 1, 2, 3, just the number. That's it. So
Nali. I can't accept expert, but no, you're absolutely right. The characters are simply 1, 2, 3. Unity, the unique, the oneness. We kind of treaded this ground last week in talking about that idea of oneness and unity, and it is another iteration of the Tao. To say the one or the unique or the oneness or the united is, this is a really bad simile, but akin to Islam's many names of Allah, it would be another way of saying the Tao in a more nuanced or specific manifestation. That's the easiest answer I could give for that.
So thank you, Michael, and then Kevin.
Yeah, I guess Aman, maybe you can answer this for me. I've also heard that Lao Tzu was either forced or coerced into writing his thoughts into the Dao De Jing. And I was wondering, this is kind of out there a little bit, but if it's true, like the end of my translation says, the violent do not die a natural death, and this is my fundamental teaching, could you almost construe that as his almost pushback against the people who may have put him in captivity and saying, you know, this may not bode well for you in the end?
Sorry, I had to mute because I was laughing. It's the ultimate be careful what you ask for. I mean, absolutely, it could be construed that way. The legend of Lao Tzu is probably that, just that, a legend. There are some scholars who believe that there was I believe it was Wei Kingdom librarian by the name of Li Er, who may have actually been the figure upon whom Lao Tzu was based. But all the chapters of the Dao De Jing were not necessarily written by this one person. At least that's the scholar's consensus. Having said that, as an origin story for the inception of this text, it says a great deal about sort of the presuppositional thinking that goes behind it, that this was not, this was not revelation handed down to be disseminated to the masses. This was extracted under duress. And it was something that this person understood so deeply that they were removing themselves from the entire equation, because he was stopped at a gate leaving the kingdom because he was riding off to just get out of Dodge. And they're like, wait, I recognize you. You're wise. Tell us what you learned before you leave. No, I don't want to. Well, stay in this gatehouse jail until you do. And so he finally did. As far as a legendary figure goes, and as far as anyone who was an author of a religious text of any kind, it is a one-of-a-kind story. As far as the violence begets a violent death, I really do think that that could be taken very pedantically as you're carrying a sword and holding me, at knife point. The end of your life doesn't look good from where I sit. But it could also be much more subtle in how much are you bucking against what the world is just driving at you. Because the more you push against that, the harder it's going to be for you long term.
Thank you for that. Kevin.
Yes, thank you. For this chapter, I would say focus on number 3. It's amazing, these numbers for my just brainstorm understanding. It could be the harmony, balance, the come to the chi, energy. That's the word could be described. That's number 3. And the one way I understand, like people saying, we even qigong or yoga, We use the breath, inhale, exhale is yin and yang. It's for me, understand yin and yang are inextricable, not immiscible. It's coexist. That's one way I understand. Normally we, could use one way, yes or no, or binary answer. And I think also from mathematics, I cannot remember another one. Another link is about, I cannot come up, I can't describe, basically divided by 3. Every time you got a shorter, like Bhagavad, the broken string, like getting, deeper. I will see 1 of 3rd. Here use exponential. The base is 2. If you base the power is 0, would it be 1? The power if it's 1 is 2 and yin yang. If it's 2 is 4. This is basically but Yi Jing is going to use this number. You could be if it's 3, that's be the 8. 8 multiplied by 8 is 64. It's not totally logically explain this, but it's kind of open mind. From mathematics side, we can from 3. It's not just 1, 2, 3. Out of 3 is magic. It basically yin and yang. You can reach one point. It's balance, harmony, the balance. Thank you.
Thank you. Do Kevin or Jason, do you want to comment on that? Or if not, I can, just basically ask maybe, Aman, you talked about going into the significance of how the yin and yang are actually used in this particular verse. And you said you could have dug a little deeper with that. Would you mind going a little deeper? If not, I can actually read Ursula.
I can do just a little bit. And actually, I think, Kevin, you provided a great basis for that. This idea, Schoolhouse Rock taught us all that 3 is a magic number. Man and a woman had a little baby and there were 3 EE in the family, which sounds so, juvenile and sophomoric, but it's the basis of the species. You have to have 2 to beget 3, to have any chance to create 3. And from there, you can expand out into all other things. As far as the mathematical components, Maritza was talking math earlier, and I was shaking in my boots because my degree's in humanities, not sciences. But yes, the logical and mathematic rationale that works its way into the I Ching and then into Taoism as by way of that is a intrinsic component that help to lend credence to their arguments. So yes, I do think that this idea that yin yang as simple male female beget an additional, and therefore you can beget everything else, is also something that is baked in here. The reason I say the explicit text where it says carry yin on their back and embrace yang in their front,
yes,
that is 180 degrees reverse of the classical Chinese medicine understanding of the human body, where there is a more yin side, there is a more yang side, the upper body is more yang, the lower body is more yin. The front of the body is more yin, and the back of the body is considered more yang. You can think of a turtle and its shell and its soft underbelly. So when there is this line to carry yin on your back, but embrace yang in your front, it is evoking an image of balancing out the already natural tendency of organisms, of creatures, of the human being itself. And that is something that we crave to do, that it's not just we are this and are that, but we seek out the other complement in the world around us.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, Aman. Elena, do you have a question, or would you like to follow up on your previous comment? If not, okay. What I can do.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes, yeah. It takes me seconds to walk outside.
That's quite all right. That's all right.
Okay, so I could speak without echo. So I have a follow-up question to Aman. So because of its balance, Aman, how do you see? So for instance, that if we say, you said the front is more yin, and the back of the human body, how it's structured, is more yang, and we definitely have certain principles and structures that it's like gravity, it works. So in this particular instance, do you see, say, for instance, the front would be connected to the upper, there's a subconscious and cosmic conscious, say, so do you see the front being connected to the upper levels, and the back, the rear part would be connected to the lower, that is subconscious? Just again, it's not necessarily relevant to this chapter, but since you brought it up, I just want to follow up.
This is the only mention of yin and yang, and so this is as good a place to sort of plumb these depths as any. These are relative terms. They do not exist in absolutes. There isn't anything you can point to in the universe and say that is yin, or you can point at and say that is yang. You can always make a comparative statement that something is more yin or is more yang relative to something else. So your subconscious would probably be more yin relative to your conscious. Your upper body is more yang relative to your lower body. Masculine qualities are more yang relative to feminine qualities. But you set me in a room with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and no matter my chromosomes, I'm the yin. He is much more yang. That's just how that works out. So I can't answer absolute that one is something versus something else, or I could only answer that it is more yin or it is more yang relative to something else you'll measure it to. You can almost think of this on terms of physics, of 0 Kelvin being the point of absolutely no subatomic movement would be the most yin conceivable state of the universe that we can imagine. But it's not yin if there's still anything left within that vacuum. And even when you get to a state of absolute vacuum, it harbors the seed of yang, that potentiality of erupting into existence, the boson that's just waiting to emerge out of the void still is there. So it's very hard to say conclusively an answer to your question that is absolute. But if you start thinking about it in terms of these as measure words and just compare them to something else, then you can probably start making an assessment for yourself. And a lot of ancient Chinese medical texts are all about arguing over the relative yin or relative yang of certain things relative to other things, namely this disease versus this cure, and do they balance out? That is one way of that. These sort of esoteric arguments have real practical implication.
So Jason, actually, do you want to also comment on this?
No, actually, I want to ask a question to Aman. So.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, I know he's a real scholar on this kind of thing. I'm not, and technically, I'm less interested on this part. So, but the question here is the 1, 2. I think in general we can consider as yin and yang, and the 1, One explanation is so-called Tai Chi. When we do Tai Chi, or we want to consider the spring ultimate, right? That's based on the Neo-Confucius interpretation. One is Tai Chi, okay. And the 3 is another interesting. At the beginning, I thought about 3 just roughly a number, because usually Chinese will use 3 as a few, okay. So basically talk about 1 which produce 2 yin and yang. Yin and yang will just like one parent, right, will produce a few kids, okay. So 3 is roughly number a few. And this a few, they will generate 10,000 things after many generations. That's one explanation. Another explanation, 3 would be means heaven, earth, and the people. Okay, so-called the sky, land, and the people. That's the very common concept in ancient Chinese. Sky means something in the time, okay, unpredictable, okay, whether raining or drought, that's the sky. The land, our space, and which we have to adapt. Okay, the sky we cannot predict. The land we should try our best to adapt. And the people, we have a full decision on that. So that's another way to explain the 3. And then I just like to see what kind of concept or what kind of understanding or what comments from among about this explanation of 1, 2, and 3. Yeah.
No, I don't think those are mutually exclusive. I do think that they can both be derived by the very vague language that's chosen here, that it's intentionally vague to be able to see this as a tool of governance, as a microcosmic sort of expression, or as a simple sort of logarithm formula to be followed. So yeah, I don't think that it's either or. I think it is intentionally vague because it's meant to be it's meant to be either and both, whatever is more applicable. But to my personal interpretation, like I said, when I read this, every time I've read this, I always see this as Yin Yang exists in a behavioral tendency of Qi that is out there regardless of interpretation. Things, climb towards an apex and they fall towards a nadir, and that is just the way that nature flows of its own accord. It's when you add a third component, an interpreter, that you can start to sort of reify that. You can start to say, oh, in that expression, it's fire. In that expression, it's a liquid. In that expression, it's solid. And it's that process of taking what is already in existence and starting to catalog it, that you get 10,000 things. You get so many things by a mind that is able to discreetly separate these moments of manifestation. And I really want to say, I am not the preeminent scholar on this subject. I am doing my best here, folks.
No, and no, we're appreciative of every word. Believe me, thank you. Thank you for taking all these questions, and these insights are absolutely tremendous. So I know, Kevin, you're next, but I'll actually have, I'm going to let Katie go first, and then because she hasn't spoken in a while, so I'll give preference to her. Go ahead, Katie.
I have 2 quick comments. I like the term 10,000 things because it makes it seem so countable, and yet it's referring to everything, but that's also the temptation of the naming of the Tao, to try to be able to make it countable. But I just love the 10,000, the way it's worded. And then my other point was, in losing much is gained, and in gaining much is lost. I feel like that's the striving principle. That you're kind of almost, it seems like you're getting nowhere in both cases. Like in losing much is gained, and in gaining, like it's in both situations you're not getting anywhere. So I think that's the main message of the Tao Te Ching, to stop striving.
So, and thank you for those comments, Katie. And we'll go to Kevin next.
Yeah, thank you, Jules. And if you guys see, I seen a link. That's beautiful. That's from one Germany mathematician, Georgian Cantor. It's basically, I got two interpretations about that. There's one line you divide by the three segments. The first one is like solid. Then leave a space. Then another solid three. You continue to doing this. You see how beautiful. It's absolutely like yin and yang. It continues going. That's the first one. Second one, you can use a pair. One line is the yang, and a second line is the yin. It basically you got one solid line. Second is like a broken line. We call it yin. It's like represent yang. So it's continuous also going. It's mathematically it's approved. It's beautiful. Those empty space basically we divide yin and yang. Between was between. That's awesome. Some balance. You think about it, what we exist. It is have something like balanced. You have something exist for sure. Something support. You have figure. You have ground. You have waterfall. Your bottom is water that keep from top going. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It's, well, folks, it's close to 11. I was gonna actually read the Ursula Le Guin and her comments, but I want to be mindful of both Jason and Amon's time. So I'll ask, do you have some closing comments and that you may have? I am really tempted to read this, but I don't want to go too long. I don't want to take up everybody's time. So do you have any closing comments? And if not, I have a couple of announcements I would like to share.
No, thank you, everybody. I'm pretty good. Yeah, thank you, Aman. Yeah, I learned a lot.
Yes, thank you, Aman.
I want to say thank you to you all. I appreciate, being sort of sought out for my interpretations. I encourage you, read some other takes. There are scholars who will absolutely disagree with my opinions, and there are some very thoughtful opinions out there. So thank you again. I will miss you all next week. I'm going to where there's more sunshine. I'll look forward to seeing you when we tackle, what will that be? 45
and 46. Yes, 45 and 46, and you'll be missed next week.
Somebody else can get a word in edgewise.
Oh well, I'll tell you. I just hope they can hold up to your standards. That's all. So again, yeah, I would encourage everybody actually to just read the Ursula Le Guin version. It's interesting. I know Katie, I had asked if you wanted to read Stephen Mitchell if we didn't run out of time, but I just wanted to. I don't want to abuse our host's time. But I would like to make a quick announcement. This Friday, we will be starting the Bhagavad-Gita, and we're very fortunate. Actually, Shrikant is going through and actually translating it from Marathi himself. So he will be doing his own translation. He's putting a lot of time and effort into this event. So I'm really excited about it. I know a few of us in this group have already committed to attending those meetups, but I really do think that that's going to be one of the most interesting meetups that we have going. So I'm really excited about that. The other ones that will be coming up, we have quite a few. Tomorrow, we have a really special meetup as well. It's part of our Comprehensivist Wednesdays, and it's in conjunction with the Greater Philadelphia Thinking Society. And my good friend Mike Amore will be presenting about a polymathic chess lesson. Mike, would you like to say anything about that?
Yeah, sure. Shrikant has given me the chance to present the game of chess in a way that connects to much of what we study here at 52 Living Ideas. I've been teaching the game for over 30 years to ages, as I put in the intro, from as young as 4 to people in their 70s. And I'm going to even include some of what we've talked about at the Dao De Jing studies, like the idea of balance and how it can exist on the chessboard. And there's architecture and math, and there's so many different disciplines that come through what we study here that have just been calling out to me for years over the board. And then we're going to take a look at a real game that was played in 1858, and I'm going to try to present it to 3 different levels: to the beginner, to people who know nothing about chess, intermediate, and people who may have some expertise, to see that if you can just look at the pieces move on the board and try to connect them to your life in some way. So I'm really excited about it. I think it should be a lot of fun. So if you're free, I'd love to have you come aboard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about it as well. You know, we were even talking a little bit earlier today about how we can link it to some of the other meetups. And, you know, one of the ones that I brought up was the Sun Tzu, The Art of War, is another one. So, and the Dao De Jing. So they're all interrelated. So it'll be a really interesting evening, making some of those connections. I'm looking forward to that quite a bit. And then we also have a couple of other meetups. We have the Future of Leadership with Jeff Nugent. That has also been a wonderful series. And we have the Gospel of John, chapter 3, for God so loved the world and you must be born again. That is Thursday night at 9 o'clock. And then Friday, Maritza will be hosting Cheating Chaos and the book Flow. That's chapter 9. And that'll be at 7 p.m. on Friday. And as I'd already mentioned, the Bhagavad-Gita, I'm sometimes a little bit slow in the pronunciation there. And it's the introduction in chapter 1. So thank you, everyone. This was a fabulous evening. Definitely read a little bit more about 42 if you can. And I look forward to seeing everybody soon. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Good night.